Peter B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, news and comments. It's Friday, March 3rd, 2017. I'm going to bring you my news and comment podcast here for the next half hour. And as we continue our experiments with Facebook Live, in about 30 minutes, we're going to open up the phone lines and talk to you. Just like the kind of call-in radio show that I hosted for years in Chicago, San Francisco, satellite radio. Gosh, we were syndicated on stations all across the country from 2005 until 2009. And I'm glad to be with you again today. The podcast is a wonderful way for me to unload the excess opinions that I carry like a monkey on my back every day. And I'm looking forward to hearing from you. If you want to call in today, the number to use is 415-455-0102. It's on the Facebook screen, too. 415-455-0102. Any calls that come in before the end of the podcast will put you on hold, and Grant is my able associate here who will get your name and information and share it with me. So I invite everyone who is watching to share their Facebook feed far and wide and let people know that this is interactive. And you can call in and even disagree with me. Yes, I would actually prefer that because it makes for a livelier conversation. So today in Washington, D.C., I compare it to a washing machine. All right, everybody's got one or knows how to use one. And if you load it up with towels or you put your dirty sneakers in there, when it hits the spin cycle, it makes an awful noise and it rocks the whole house. I think you can follow me. The spin machine in Washington is at maximum RPM today, spinning wildly to either, if you're a Democrat, find a way to get rid of Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, or, if you're a Republican, find a way to put aside your biblical thinking for some pat rationalizations about why Jeff Sessions spoke an untruth under oath at his Senate confirmation hearing. Now, Mr. Sessions has acknowledged that what he said wasn't fully true. And he's now quibbling over whether he misunderstood Senator Al Franken's question or whether it just slipped his feeble mind. And I certainly would love to see this be the reason that Jeff Sessions exits the political stage permanently. I'd love to see that. But I need to point out that many of the Democrats who are angling for his scalp today and calling his untruthfulness perjury, they were silent when James Clapper, Barack Obama's Director of National Intelligence, lied under oath when he was questioned by Senator Wyden of Oregon. And James Clapper kept his job for 3 years, despite the obvious perjury that he committed. And I would argue that the standards in Washington have been lowered, and that you can lie in front of the cameras, you can lie to Congress if your name is Trump, and you can tell little white lies about whether or not you met with the Russian ambassador. And when we look at the text, and Al Franken, talked about the dossier from Christopher Stevens that had surfaced, and he said to Jeff Sessions, if it's true, it's obviously extremely serious, and if there's any evidence that anyone infiltrated with the Trump campaign, anyone affiliated with the Trump campaign, communicated with the Russian government in the course of this campaign, what will you do? Now, that was the question that he was asked, what will you do? He didn't answer that question. What he said was, Senator Franken, I'm not aware of any of those activities. I've been called a surrogate at a time or two in that campaign, and I did not have communications with the Russians, and I'm unable to comment on it. Now, he made that declaration. It wasn't really properly in response to the question that was asked, which is, what are you going to do about it? And instead, he declared, I didn't have communications with the Russians. So he blurted this out as he was attempting to dodge the actual question that came from Al Franken. And now he is hung up on the truthiness of that statement. And Paul Krugman, who needs therapy after his delusional performance last year, his ravings in support of Hillary Clinton, and his bizarre attacks on Bernie Sanders, well, he got it right in his column today in the New York Times. He made a list of the liars who populate the Trump cabinet. He said, let's not focus too much on Sessions. He is joined in the cabinet by Scott Pruitt, the Environmental Protection Agency administrator, who lied to Congress about his use of a private email account. Tom Price, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, who lied about a sweetheart deal to purchase stock in a biotech company at a discount. And Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, who falsely told Congress that his financial firm didn't engage in robo-signing of foreclosure documents seizing homes without proper considerations. Now, the partisan politics of this is predictable. It's understandable. But I have to say that the standards in Washington did slide under Democratic rule, and now we are facing the outcome of that slide. And over at the Washington Post, Chris Cizilla, who writes the Fix column, he echoes a comment I made yesterday and that I kind of just posed to you a moment ago, which is, why did he just blurt out this comment that he didn't have any contact? This is what has embroiled him in this controversy now. And Sessions responded on Thursday. He said, I was taken aback about this brand new information. It struck me very hard, and that's what I focused on in my answer. In retrospect, I should have slowed down and said I did meet one Russian official a couple of times. So he has made very clear that he made a statement that isn't true. Is it perjury? Well, only an investigation and only, I think, further sworn testimony from Jeff Sessions can help us resolve that. Faz Shakir is now the National Political Director for the American Civil Liberties Union. He's an old buddy of mine, and I've invited him to call in later in this hour. We'll see if he's able to do so. He worked at the Center for American Progress, where he was the editor of the Think Progress blog. And then he went to work for the House Democrats, where he was research director. He joined the ACLU just a couple of months ago. And in today's Guardian newspaper, he quotes the oath that Jeff Sessions took to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth when he sat down to testify for his confirmation, and then said, well, Jeff Sessions needs to tell the whole truth. And the lame defenses that have been raised by Sean Hannity, by members of Congress, by Rush Limbaugh, are kind of equivalent to Bill Clinton's carefully parsed statement, I did not have social intercourse with that ambassador. And so I think Faz makes an important point here. He closes by saying, Jeff Sessions should take his own advice and welcome a full and fair investigation into whether he lied during his confirmation hearing. The Attorney General deserves to be presumed innocent, but the American people also deserve a full investigation into whether he committed a federal crime by lying under oath. And Jeff Sessions has held others to a very high standard in the past, but he doesn't want to be treated that way in the current context. And Charlie Savage over at the New York Times speculates on what will happen now that Jeff Sessions has recused himself from any investigation or prosecution of issues related to the claims of Russian interference and collusion with the Trump campaign or allies. And there is no special prosecutor law on the books as there was up through the 1990s. Both parties kind of had enough of the special prosecutor and let that expire. But the Justice Department could name a special counsel who is supposed to have some level of independence from the political officers at the Department of Justice. But it's not a clean arm's length relationship. And so what we believe may happen is that the current acting under Attorney General or Assistant Attorney General, whose name is Bonte, Dana Bonte, B-O-E-N-T-E. He's the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia. Now, the full-time replacement for Sally Yates has been named by the Trump administration. He is Rod Rosenstein, the U.S. Attorney for Maryland. So it is unclear at this point whether Rosenstein would be quizzed in a session with the Judiciary Committees about his intentions for investigating these issues. And it's still not clear that we could get a prosecutor who has the independence and the resources to pursue these questions wherever they may go. I want to remind you that I'm live on Facebook today, and coming up about 20 minutes from now, we'll be opening up the phone lines and taking your calls about the news stories and the comments that I'm offering right now. And you can join me. Just call in at 415-455-0102. That's 415-455-0102. And I look forward to hearing from listeners and viewers wherever you happen to be. So join us in a few minutes as we'll take your calls. Yesterday, I released an in-depth interview to my subscribers at peterbcollins.com, and my guest in this interview is Gareth Porter, a longtime independent journalist and historian, and he issued a warning to progressives to take great care about getting on the anti-Russia bandwagon in the current context, because you've got a series of very difficult choices to make that could put you on the side of very hawkish political players who wouldn't mind seeing a new Cold War or even a shooting war with Russia. Here's an excerpt from my conversation with Gareth Porter, and I invite you to listen to the full interview at peterbcollins.com.
There is this campaign of using leaks from former Obama administration intelligence officials, particularly John Brennan, former CIA director, to implicate Trump aides and indeed Trump himself in sort of being having an illicit understanding or a deal of some sort, or at least configuring some sort of understanding with the Russians about rolling back the sanctions or basically ending the state of tension that has been created during the Obama administration. And that has become a kind of a general cry, a war cry on the part of Democrats and people, generally speaking, on the left. Not everyone, of course, but this has become sort of a broad, sweeping generalization that people have made who don't like Trump for very legitimate reasons, but who have gotten on this bandwagon. And I believe that this is a very dangerous situation.
Situation was the final word that got cut off there. The full interview with Gareth Porter, I think, is pretty interesting. And when you find time, I hope you will catch up with it at peterbcollins.com, at TuneIn, iTunes, Spreaker, Stitcher, all of the outlets where you can find the Peter B. Collins podcast, and my daily news and comment podcast that some people are seeing on the Facebook video feed today. It's available every day free at YouTube, and that's an easy platform for a lot of people to access, and we have a growing audience on YouTube right now. Every day I pause to thank the people who support my work with this podcast by subscribing. And it includes some great people. I want to single out Alexandra Marin, who lives in Surprise, Arizona. And my big surprise today was that she kicked in $200. Wow. Thank you, Alex. I really do appreciate that. Now, she's been very generous, and one of the things I do when people are generous like this is I offer scholarships, because I know that not everybody has loose change. Not everybody has a disposable income and can afford to fork over bucks to Peter B. So if you find yourself in a position where you would like a scholarship to the Peter B. Collins podcast, just send me an email, peter@peterbcollins.com, and I'll tip you off that so far I have never turned down a request. We've been talking about the dissembling, the lying. Is it perjury in Washington, D.C.? Well, in corporate America and beyond the Beltway, there is, to some extent, accountability for people who are deceptive. And yesterday it was announced that the top lawyer at Yahoo, Ronald Bell, and the CEO, Marissa Mayer, covered up the various hacks of the Yahoo networks that have come to light, and as many as 500 million user accounts were compromised. Well, it takes a while for the wheels to turn, and this didn't happen in a court. It didn't require an attorney general. But the board of directors of Yahoo stripped Marissa Mayer of $14 million, part of that in cash, a bonus, and part of it in equity stocks. And she is not going to receive those because of her role in the deception. And Ron Bell has been sacked. He has been dismissed from Yahoo. Now, there are plenty of actors who get away with all kinds of things in corporate America every day, but at least in this case, there is some accountability. And there's accountability for the accountants who screwed up the Oscars the other night. The PricewaterhouseCoopers team that was on stage in Los Angeles and gave the wrong envelope to Warren Beatty, who proceeded to hand it off to Faye Dunaway, who announced the wrong winner of Best Picture. Well, we have learned more that Brian Cullinan, who was the PWC person, there were two of them on stage there, he was ticked off because of what Chris Rock did a year ago. Instead of trotting out the accountants, Chris Rock brought 3 children with large briefcases out. And so the accountants were still miffed about that. And this Cullinan guy was busy tweeting backstage. He tweeted out a picture of the Best Actress winner, which had been announced just before he gave away the wrong envelope. So he didn't get sacked because he's a partner at Price Waterhouse, but we're told that he's not invited to come back and hand out the envelopes next year. Here's a broken promise for you. Now, I am speaking to you via an iPhone. This is made by Apple, but it's manufactured by the fine folks at Foxconn, mostly in China. And Foxconn runs a business with over 1 million employees in their assembly sweatshops. And I am frankly embarrassed that I love the Apple technology, but I hate its origins. Well, we're now learning about the broken promises that Foxconn has made. Most recently, they told Donald Trump that they would invest $50 billion in the United States. Is that right? Anyway, it was a lot of money, $7 billion, and hire up to 50,000 workers in the U.S. But their previous promises, like in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, where they said they would invest $30 million and hire 500 workers, it's never happened. And in Chandler, Arizona, Barack Obama went there to announce with great flourish the opening of a $5 billion Intel computer chip plant known as Fab 42, but it has never been completed. And when Trump took office, the chief executive of Intel went to the Oval and said, hey, we're going to invest $7 billion, just like we had told Obama we would. So also in Brazil, in Vietnam, there's a trail of broken promises by Foxconn all around the globe. Well, those nasty threats that were made to Jewish community centers and synagogues and schools over the past months, we know that some of them came from a St. Louis man who used to work for The Intercept, the online magazine that was founded by Glenn Greenwald with big money from Pierre Omidyar. His name is Juan Thompson, and he made some of the threats in his own name and others in the name of a former girlfriend. This seems to be some sort of payback to that girlfriend. Now, he didn't put porn pictures or videos up, but it is arguably worse that he was able to obscure his caller ID and make calls to these Jewish centers and make threats, sometimes in the name of the girlfriend. And this doesn't explain all of these incidents, but apparently somewhere between half a dozen and a dozen of them. Now, a statement issued by The Intercept today. We were horrified to learn this morning that Juan Thompson, a former employee of The Intercept, has been arrested in connection with bomb threats against the ADL and multiple Jewish community centers, in addition to cyberstalking. These actions are heinous, should be fully investigated and prosecuted. We have no information about Thompson, other than that he worked for The Intercept from November of 14 to January of 2016, when he was fired after we discovered he had fabricated sources and quotes in his articles. Coming up about 10 minutes from now, we're going to open up the phone lines here at the secret studio, the Peter B. Collins Show, and I invite you to call in, and we'll talk about the news that I'm relating to you or something else that may be on your mind. You can grab a line right now by calling 415-455-0102. Live call-ins welcome here at 415-455-0102. We understand that there are some disputes, some political food fights going on in the Trump White House. Now, he told us that his White House is a fine-tuned engine. But there are a couple of cylinders that are not firing in time, anyway. Over the issue, in one case, of the Paris Climate Agreement, Trump said that he wanted to back out. The problem is that it's an agreement with 194 nations, and the U.S. can back out of it, but it's a 4-year process, and we have not given notice at this point. But what's interesting is that first daughter Ivanka Trump is one of the voices saying, hey, Daddy, don't do that. This could have broad and damaging diplomatic ramifications. And I am truly shocked that Rexon Tillerson, yes, Rex Tillerson is the former CEO of ExxonMobil, now our Secretary of State, if you can believe it, and he has advised Trump not to pull out of the Paris Climate Accords. I'm surprised by that. The other fight is over the plan to cut funding for the Internal Revenue Service. And this, of course, is something that will pander to the base, but injure the government and the Trump administration. Because if you don't have people out there collecting taxes and auditing people like Trump every year, you're not going to collect much money. We think that Trump hasn't paid taxes for as long as 20 years. And so Trump, long-time, grievances against the IRS, he wants to get even. And he has proposed a 14% cut to the budget at the IRS, and it's already been cut to the bone. So his Treasury Secretary, Steve Mnuchin, who I mentioned earlier, who is one of the dissemblers at his confirmation hearings, he has told Trump, hey, don't cut the IRS. That's our ATM. Every day I try to relate one heartbreaking story about an immigrant who's been caught up in the dragnet that's been unleashed by Trump. Daniela Vargas, a 22-year-old woman who came to the United States from Argentina as a 7-year-old child, was a dreamer. She was allowed to stay under the Deferred Action Program. Daniela Vargas appeared Wednesday at a news conference in Mississippi. She talked about her fears of being deported. She talked about how her father and brother have recently been deported. Moments later, as she was driving away, she was picked up by authorities. We think it was ICE, although this news account doesn't tell us specifically. And she is threatened with immediate deportation. She's currently being held at a federal lockup in Louisiana, and they're saying that they're going to process her as a visa waiver overstay, which means that she could be given a hearing and would be flown to Argentina in the near future. And I am very disappointed to see this, and it's another example of what the true human cost is of Trump's actions. One of the things that we are learning is that there is a second study by the intelligence unit at the Department of Homeland Security about the threat that Donald Trump says he is addressing with his travel ban that was put on hold by the courts, and the threatened replacement of that travel ban by executive order that is due to be released last week and the week before, and we don't know exactly when it will surface. But the bottom line here is that the Trump team cannot prove that there is a real security threat coming from the countries that travel has been banned from. So this new internal Department of Homeland Security document that was shared by Rachel Maddow on MSNBC on Thursday night, quote, we assess that most foreign-born U.S.-based violent extremists likely radicalized several years after their entry to the United States, limiting the ability of screening and vetting to prevent their entry because of national security concerns. So this is another piece of analysis that shows that the Trump administration is responding to racist misinformation and is pandering to some of the darkest elements in our society, and that this is the basis, the true basis, of the order, the travel ban, and the so-called Muslim ban. Over on Capitol Hill, there's a game of hide-and-seek underway to try to get a copy of the draft proposals to repeal and replace Obamacare. And both members of both parties are getting in on the fun, trotting around, setting up little scenes for media cameras to capture. And we're told that within a week or so, the committees will vote on a measure that no one has yet seen. And so Rand Paul was running around with a portable copy machine saying, if anybody's got a draft, I'd like a copy of it. He did that for the benefit of cameras. And then Steny Hoyer went on Facebook Live, just like me, and trotted around the Capitol, did a little conversation with a Lincoln statue, and tried to make the case that this is a secret bill. Now, once again, this is great political theater, but let's recall how the Obama administration kept all of the proceedings related to the Trans-Pacific Partnership secret until the deal was, about to be approved for fast-track status by the Congress. And so this is not something new or that is particular to Republicans. Fed Chairwoman Janet Yellen is giving a clear signal that the Fed will be raising interest rates starting later this month, and they're going to take the training wheels off the economy. Now, this was the response to the Wall Street meltdown of 2008, and we have been running with almost free money since then. And this has created a problem on the savings side, because you know that if you put money in the bank and you're only getting 1% interest, there is very little incentive for you to put more money in the bank. And so this is the long-term effort to put the economy back on a normal footing, and we'll see how that goes. Across the bay from me is a woman who was once married to the man who's accused of shooting up the Orlando nightclub called Pulse, where over 40 people were killed. And her name is Salman. Her name is Noor Salman. And she is described as not mentally retarded, but she was a special needs student in high school. So she has not full mental capacity, is the polite way to put it. And the whole story of the Orlando nightclub shooting is riddled with more questions than answers. We know that Omar Mateen was treated badly by redneck sheriffs who he worked alongside at the Port St. Lucie Sheriff's Department in the courthouse there. We know that he was a conflicted, closeted gay Muslim, and that he had attended the Pulse nightclub as a customer. We know that he had prior contact with the FBI, and most of that has been swept under the rug, and his widow has been, in many respects, tried in the media as the U.S. Attorney's Office has trotted out their allegations that she helped Mateen case locations. She knew he was watching Islamic State recruitment videos, and she created an alibi for him on the night of the shooting. She was due to be released today, and a federal magistrate in Oakland had ordered that release, but the magistrate was was overruled by the judge who is handling the prosecution in Orlando, and she will remain in custody for the foreseeable future. Good news for protesters who took on the drones that operate from the Hancock Air Base in upstate New York. They were acquitted by a jury last night. 4 drone resistors, James Ricks, Daniel Burns, Brian Hines, and Ed Kinane, they were found innocent of all charges. And the jury deliberated for only about half an hour. And after the verdict, one of the jurors approached one of the protesters and said, "I really support what you're doing. Keep doing it." So this is a case of jury nullification. And I'd like to see it happen more often. In Egypt, a court has cleared the way for the release of the former dictator Hosni Mubarak. He, of course, presided over a lengthy dictatorship and detained many people and tortured them. And, of course, he was ousted during what we called the Arab Spring. But that's all really a distant memory. And the U.S., of course, closed ranks when the elected subsequent leader of Egypt was deposed in a military coup that we don't call a military coup. And the U.S. has stopped protesting the human rights violations that occur frequently in Egypt. Now, here's a guy who really believes in full disclosure and transparency. He's running for governor of Arizona, 36-year-old Noah Dyer. And he's seen how other politicians get derailed or kicked out of the game because they hide things in their past. So in a preemptive move, Noah Dyer has put up on his website details of his sexual past. Quote, Noah has both deep and casual sexual experiences with all kinds of women. He's an advocate of open relationships. He's had group sex and sex with married women. Well, the media won't be able to exploit that, right? Because he's already put it out there. By the way, he says he's deeply in debt. He has a negative net worth based on $100,000 in student loans. And by the way, he's divorced, and while the court arrangement is 30% custody, he claims he has about 50% custody. I'm going to open up the phone lines now. I'd like to talk with you at 415-455-0102. Lines are open. Call in, and Grant will take your call right now. 415-455-0102. And you can comment on any of the stories that I've shared with you, or you can bring up something else. It's a completely open forum, and I invite you to join in here at 415-455-0102. Now, while I'm waiting for your calls to come in, the Vice News website today is featuring a hilarious video compilation of Alex Jones. Now, Alex Jones is a bit of a scourge to an independent media guy like me because occasionally he raises issues that I raise too. That doesn't mean we really agree, but there are times when we talk about the same things and share some of the same skepticism. But he is so over the top and whacked out that he is also a negative kind of scourge to independent media operators like me. So I'm going to play part of this clip for you because what it shows is it's entitled, tongue-in-cheek, Alex Jones, Master of Self-Control. And what you're going to hear is Alex get worked up, bent out of shape, lose control, and he inevitably apologizes for it. Let's take a listen.
That through your stinking traitorous heads. Excuse me, I apologize. We have a lot of Christian affiliates. I am a Christian. But I will stomp your head in if you start a fight with me, you thug scum. Anyways, excuse me, ladies and gentlemen. Bunch of cowards. Excuse me. I'm going to control myself right now. She is a demon damned to hell. Excuse me. I've been trying to control myself, trying to be professional about this. But at a certain point, I'm just really getting pissed. Excuse me. We're not going to have Pepsi with baby flavoring in it. I mean, what the hell have we become? Excuse me. If I didn't have a liberal from New York in the bathroom, I couldn't wipe my ass. Excuse me. I apologize. We have a family audience. That was wrong, and I won't do it again. You think I'm a coward like you? I'm sorry. You dishonorable, cowardly pieces of garbage. Excuse me.
Excuse me.
Coming for you.
Pardon me.
Coming for you. We know what you're doing. I'm sorry. Piles of manipulative, lying crap. Excuse me. They're going to burn in hell. Excuse me. This is a time bomb. Excuse me. You're a big tough guy, buddy? You just rammed into me? Ah, how do you like that? Now hit me in the face and see what happens, punk. I'm sorry. There's an attack on the species.
Excuse me. Well, Alex Jones is out there to make me look rational, reasonable, calm, collected. Tell me what you think. I'm sitting here looking at an empty switchboard, and I'm looking at my camera phone, and I see that we have 13 people who are watching us on Facebook Live right now. I invite one of you to pick up that fancy cell phone that you've got there that you paid way too much money for and call me at 415-455-0102. That's 415-455-0102. I invite you to call in, and just like a radio call-in show or that C-SPAN show where people call and make comments, this is your opportunity to be heard on the Peter B. Collins podcast and on our Facebook Live feed. So we got Jason Spitzer there. Alex is watching. Derek Blair just shared the video. Thank you, Derek. I do appreciate that. Alex, you need the number again. It's 415-455-0102. And I know the system is working. We tested it earlier. So give us a call, and we will talk about what is on your mind today. And there certainly is plenty to talk about. Now, I want to share with you an exchange that I had on Facebook yesterday. And it really highlights a number of issues for me. The post was from my friend Rich Robinson. And I've known Rich for a long time. He is an active Democrat. He is a guy who is a lawyer and a professional who works on local political campaigns. He once worked on the statewide campaigns for Dianne Feinstein for governor and for Senate. So he's a very smart and accomplished guy. And he posted in all caps, in large letters on Facebook, "How could Trump happen in America? How could it effing happen here?" And I took that as an opportunity that maybe Rich is understanding that he and other Democrats, by squeezing out Bernie Sanders, by looking the other way when the Clinton Foundation was exposed, by pretending that the email scandal was not significant and wouldn't bring her down, that it was loyal Democrats and the superdelegates who produced the outcome of Donald Trump as President of the United States. So, in response to Rich, I wrote, "Since you asked, Rich, it was partly due to loyal Dems like you, who pushed Clinton over Sanders even after it was clear that her appeal was maxed out with no undecideds, while his was more fluid, more undecideds. The self-inflicted wounds of the foundation and the email scandal were obvious as the DNC and superdelegates tilted the primaries to Clinton and bet the ranch on her because the party leaders were convinced that Trump could never win. In early August, I predicted Trump would win, not because I'm brilliant, because I wasn't trapped in the Dem bubble. And your questions here suggest you're still in that bubble." Well, Rich responded, "Peter, we disagree. HRC won by over 3 million votes. When you miss by that little, there are 1,000 reasons why she is not president. I didn't predict Trump would win because I believed Americans were smarter than that, though I was emailing the Clinton campaign that the numbers were too close. In fact, all the polls in battleground states fell within the margin of error. I also warned that undecided voters were Trump voters. Racists don't like to admit their racism to pollsters. In the final analysis, we have too many racists in our society. The Civil War was never over. I thought we were improving. But apparently the rural areas of this country, including Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, have too many bigots still living." Well, I think that Rich misses the entire point. Sure, there are some people who are racists who support Donald Trump. There's no question about that. But not all the people who voted for him, and not all the people who were blocked from voting for Hillary by Republican voter suppression tactics, are either racists or victims of racism. So I'll continue this conversation, and I welcome your comments. Why is Trump president? Why did Hillary lose? 415-455-0102. And here comes Alex in Arizona. Hello, Alex. You're the first caller live on the Peter B. Collins Facebook feed.
Hey, Peter B. Thank you so much for what you do. Two things there's so much going on, but the two things that get me angry almost on a daily basis is, one, everybody that says, yes, let's build a wall, shows complete hatred and disdain for others, especially those with a darker melanin content. And I just want to scream at them, where did everybody come from, and give the indigenous people and Mexican people back their land, and everyone else get out of the continent of North America.
Well,
It's
Alex,
it's horrible to hear that from people, and such ignorance and such hatred for others.
Well, you make a couple of good points there, and at its base, the concept of the wall is a racist signal, because it assumes that the big problem we have with immigration is at our southern border and that it is entirely Mexican in its composition. We know that net migration from Mexico has dropped and is at an all-time low. It's about flat right now. And there are people coming from Guatemala and Honduras and El Salvador fleeing violence who are trying to get through Mexico to the United States. But the idea of the wall doesn't account for all of the Asians and Europeans and Africans and South Americans who have overstayed visas in this country. And that's why, at its basis, it is an icon for racism.
Yes, it is. And the other thing that gets me is the blatant, people don't hide it anymore. The floodgates have opened and disappeared. People feel very comfortable in just letting their racism flag fly. It's horrible to see. And then the other piece that gets me is people that I thought were more liberal-minded, Democrats, so-called, and liberals, are now, very conservative and believing the rhetoric and false narratives about the Russians, and they're the ones that wanted Hillary, that refused to accept any of the information about her, or the Democrats stealing the election and the primary. So I am in a unique situation of being one of a handful of people that are not that don't. Very few people feel the way I do. So it's very isolating to in these days to have the philosophy I have about humanity. So.
Well, especially in a red state like Arizona.
Oh Lord, I can't say anything to anyone here. They have people walking around with guns on their belts. They're actually flying the American flag and Confederate flag and the "Don't Tread on Me" flag, full brazenly. And so I have to be very careful.
Well, and what is really stunning is how much ignorance drives so many of these views. And people are proud to be ignorant. They are proud to have low information. They're proud to base their emotional, angry, hateful responses on falsehoods. And, as I covered earlier, we have really substantial information that Trump's travel ban would not protect us from terrorism. And his hysterical claims, that we had to implement this right away without any warning or delays. And now it's been over a month since the courts put his original royal decree on hold. And they just keep taking their time, despite the fact that they claim that, we are in desperate danger on a minute-by-minute basis. I mean, these are people who spend too much time watching television dramas like 24 and Homeland.
Jesus, and the facts mean nothing, as you know, and that most of the terrorism and horrible things that have happened in this country were from white males.
Well, and that most of the, so-called domestic terrorism cases are tainted by paid FBI informants. Some of them are outright frame-ups. And yet they are treated as fact, and they're recited as, we've got Boston, we've got Orlando, we've got San Bernardino. And each of those cases, there are really significant questions about the credibility of the claims and about the fact that these individuals had contact with the FBI, at least in the case of Boston and Orlando, before they went postal. And so, a lot of this is incoherent, and it goes unchallenged by elected leaders and by media pundits. And they simply, keep regurgitating things as fact that are clearly unproven. And it has sent us into a twilight zone these days, Alex.
Yeah. Facts mean nothing. People's fears, ignorance, and racism abound. Even those that I thought wouldn't hold those feelings. So, Peter, thank you so much for what you do. You are a vital part of my sanity in these horrible times, and I just praise you all the way around.
Well, thanks, Alex, and I promise not to go off like Alex Jones, but I do have a question for you. Since Noah Dyer is in Arizona running for governor, and he claims to have had group sex and sex with married women, can we rule you out as one of his paramours? Would you like to deny that you've ever had sex, group sex, or any kind of sex with Noah Dyer?
I claim the fifth.
I love it.
Although those activities are not half as bad as what everybody else has been doing.
Yeah, to get screwed and have a good orgasm is a lot different than just getting screwed.
Yeah, I like that.
All right, Alex. Thank you for your call. Now, one of my loyal listeners and supporters and a frequent contributor on Facebook, Carl's on the line from Columbus, Ohio. Good evening, Carl.
Almost too frequent, Peter, but,
How you doing, Carl?
You know this. I wanted to make sort of an unpopular speculation as regards to illegal immigration because, as you pointed out, there's far more than just the one source that's being identified by this administration in order to, create nationalist points. And one of them goes right back to the Mitch McConnell, Elaine Chao family. And I think you know where I'm going with this, but it has to do with allegations that have been made for a long time against Elaine Chao's father of trafficking, narco trafficking, and even human trafficking. Now, this is coming through American ports. It's hardly the subject of any sort of interdiction efforts, and it also hardly has anything to do with Hispanic or other Latin people.
Mm-hmm.
And so we talk about porous borders. I mean, obviously, as it has been pointed out by many sources, that we're not looking at immigration that is coming through the northern border. We don't know anything about the eastern border, but as far as like the western border, we know that activity is coming through basically carte blanche into ports such as Los Angeles and San Francisco, and sometimes it does net either illegal drugs or illegal caches of humans that are coming over here from Asian ports of call.
Well, and Carl, you're on point here. We know that the $1 million green cards, which have been discounted to $500,000 now, are mostly being purchased by wealthy Asians, primarily Chinese. And so we know that if you've got money, you can buy residency and a green card in the United States. But if you come here to wash dishes or mow lawns or to raise a family, you're considered other and subject to immediate deportation. So, I mean, our double standards they abound in so many different
cases. They really
cases.
do. And then another question would be, all the Republican candidates are required to kiss the ring of the Zionist godfather, Sheldon Adelson. And he also is involved in some of this illegal Asian activity that we know of, although the investigations continue to be squelched all the time.
Well, Sheldon Adelson is a highly corrupt guy who has paid bribes to win casino deals in Macau. Yes. And let me tell you about the place he has in Singapore, okay? And I can't prove that there was any corruption there. I only know that corruption is a major part of business dealings in Singapore. But I visited there about 2.5 years ago, and there is this brand new hotel. It's 3 towers, at least 50 stories each. And connecting the towers across the top is this huge thing that looks like a freighter, like a big ship. Oh. And, Singapore is the busiest port in the world. There are hundreds of ships anchored off there every day. And so it's kind of cool if you imagine approaching Singapore from sea. One of the first things in your binoculars would be this thing that looks like a ship that's on top of this building. Well, there's a huge casino on the lower level of this complex, and that's where Adelson makes his money. But it's widely believed, at least the people I talk to in Singapore, that he, greased the officials and others to win the contract and to control that facility. And we know
there seems to be so much going on with him that we don't even know if there's any connection between him and, for example, Likud Party officials, maybe even some connection to conflict minerals. We don't know any of these things, and they're not likely to come up either.
Mm-hmm. Well, Carl, you made some very good points there. I really appreciate your call today.
You bet. You see, I didn't know what I was going to talk about. You see?
Yeah, I do.
All right. We'll talk again.
Okay, bye-bye. And that really reminds me, by the way, there's a line open for you at 415-455-0102. We'll take calls till the top of the hour here. 415-455-0102. And I enjoy the whole process of doing a live show like this and taking your calls, because it's so unpredictable. I didn't know what Carl was going to talk about. I didn't know what Alex was going to talk about. And if you call next, I don't know what you're going to talk about. But I enjoy that give and take and the element of surprise. And I want to pay tribute to a guy who was really a master of that in talk radio, who passed away recently. And that's Alan Colmes. And sure, most people know Alan Colmes from being the punching bag for Sean Hannity on Hannity and Colmes on the Fox News channel for what? They did that for a dozen years. But at night, Alan Colmes used to host a 3-hour radio show. And he did a lot of different things to attract a bipartisan audience. And one of the things he would do is just open up the show and not screen calls. He would just punch the buttons as calls came in and see who was on the line and what they had to say. And I thought he had a lot of fun with it. He knew many of his callers who would frequently phone into him. And I just give him a lot of credit for the way he conducted his show and the way he survived his brutal partnership with Sean Hannity. 415-455-0102. I've got a call coming up here in just a second, but I invite you to join in here. We're on Facebook Live. We are recording this. This will be distributed with my news and comment podcast today, and we'll keep trying it here. I'll do this again next Friday, and we'll see if we can start to build an audience. And this gives me the opportunity to reach directly to viewers and listeners like you without needing a transmitter, a radio station, a corporate sponsor, and a program director who tells me what I should or shouldn't talk about. Ian's on the line from New York City tonight. Hello, Ian. How you doing?
I am doing well. Good to speak to you again, Peter.
Yeah, nice to talk to you. Tell me what's on your mind, Ian.
First, I just wanted to respond to our mutual friend Carl's comment. I think in terms of illegal immigration, if this country really wanted to stop it, it could just move to a worker ID requirement of some form and then put the burden on the employers, such that your first violation would be $10,000, your second would be $20,000, your third $50,000. If that were to happen, you'd find no job for any type of undocumented workers.
Well, here's the problem with that is that those employers make massive contributions to lawmakers, and they tend to escape prosecution. There are occasional raids where, for example, the meat packers that openly recruit employees in Mexico and bring them into the country illegally, they occasionally get raided, and they simply go recruit another round of people who they consider to be low-paid, disposable workers. And as long as that is permitted to occur, the magnet for so-called illegal immigration will be a very powerful one.
Absolutely. That's where I was going with the idea. If you had violations that were so stiff, where the third violation got you to $50,000, you take away the incentive of doing that. But what I was going to say is that the lobbies would never let this go through, because what they want is this cheap labor force that really doesn't have any way to protect its own rights. So to me, the entire story is really kind of a BS excuse to keep people in the dark and keep the cheap labor force.
Well, and I saved a clipping here that I haven't had room for in the podcast so far this week. But it's an article from the San Francisco Chronicle that takes a look at the concept that was floated in a slogan by Trump in his faux State of the Union message on Tuesday night, where he talked about merit-based immigration. But that parallels the H-1B visa program. And once again, we have people who are brought to this country so their skills can be exploited at a rate lower than Americans would earn, say, at a Silicon Valley tech company, and they are captive to that employer. Sure, legally they could seek a job at another company, but once you're sponsored for an H-1B, you are, de facto locked into that employer. And this led to the wage fixing scheme that was launched by Steve Jobs. St. Steve Jobs at Apple, what was this, about 8 or 10 years ago? He got together with Google and with other tech companies in the Valley, and it was both a carrot and a stick approach. It was, let's all get together. If you don't poach my engineers and pay them more money, I'll be able to keep them here without giving them raises. And the stick part of it was, if you recruit one of my engineers, I will screw you. And we have a clear case where a recruiter for Google contacted an Apple engineer, and Steve Jobs called Larry Page, and that recruiter was fired the next day. So the games that employers play around immigration issues are murky, not well understood by most people. But when Trump called for merit-based immigration, my interpretation of it, and we never know what he really means because he never proposes a policy, but it suggested to me of an expanded H-1B program. Ian, is there anything else you want to add here?
Well, you've only got 2 minutes to go, so you'll have to be a short answer. But I'm curious, from your, I guess, almost 4 decades in broadcasting now, how you feel about the current state of affairs and how scared should we be? Is this as dire as you've ever seen? And I raise in the sense of, I don't know if you remember all the old All in the Family episodes, but there was a good one about, it was Sally, who was Archie's daughter, and the meathead were debating having a child. And the meathead's point was, how can we bring a kid into the world these days? Well, that was 40 years ago, and it seems like it's been a decent 40-year run if they had a child back then. So I'm sort of looking at it from the world today as you've seen it with your 40 years of experience, how you feel about the current state of affairs.
All right, Ian. Well, I'll wrap up with that. Thank you for a provocative point, and I appreciate your call. I started doing talk radio when Dick Nixon was president, and I credit him with success I had as a young man hosting a radio show in Chicago. And the reason is that I covered the Watergate scandal in great depth. Every night we talked about it. And the benefit for me was it took me to the top of the ratings, and it helped me launch what passes for a career in media. But things have changed so much, and I really start with the lock that donors have on our political leaders, and that those who get elected owe their jobs to the people who paid for their campaigns. And the corruption, it kind of swivels out from there. The Democrats, starting with Bill Clinton and the DLC, the Democratic Leadership Committee or Council, they moved the party much more into a corporate direction. And don't take my word for it. Read Listen Liberal, a powerful book published last year by my friend Thomas Frank. And on the Republican side, we know what started with Reagan and what has evolved into this race and class-based appeal, pandering to the most ignorant and fundamentalist elements in our society. And we also know that the political system is in very bad shape. Not only was the 2000 election stolen by the Republicans for Bush, the 2004 election was hijacked in Ohio, on behalf of George W. Bush, and I firmly believe that the Democratic primary was rigged against Bernie Sanders last year, and that the general election was rigged for Trump due to the success of the various voter suppression schemes that were operated very consciously by the Republicans. So I have to say, and I don't want to leave you totally depressed here because you may be out of your favorite antidepressant, but these are truly troubling and dark times. And I've never seen the confluence of these forces that I just described come together and take us down, 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 and further down. So we must continue to fight. This is one way for us to connect. I'm trying out this Facebook feed to bring a live and interactive element to the podcast. And I hope that you'll support it and help us recruit new viewers online and listeners to the podcast so that we can form our little community here and see what we can do to confront and resist the degradation of our country and our society. Thanks for joining me today for this experimental live feed on Facebook. It's available in podcast form in just a few minutes. It'll be up at peterbcollins.com and all of my outlets. And I'll be back again Monday with another news and comment podcast on many of these same outlets. I'm Peter B.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling.